next session, which I have great excitement for, because this is my own area of interest. So I'm delighted to welcome Professor Martin Riexinger, who's joining us from Aarhus University in Denmark, where he's Associate Professor in Arabic and Islamic Studies. Martin has worked on various parts of the Muslim majority world, including Southeast Asia and Turkey. He's also including material here on the Arab world, so he's a geographical generalist, perhaps it's possible to say.
Not totally, but relatively broad, yes.
And particularly salient for our purposes today, he's worked a lot on Islamic creationism and attitudes towards biological evolution in the Muslim world. So over to you, Martin.
Yeah. In the schedule, my paper is announced as Evolution in the Qur'an and the Contemporary Muslim World. And actually, I have been given it more of an emphasis on the latter aspect, because also because many of the scriptural sources have already been mentioned. So I will not elaborate that much on that issue, but rather on how Muslims responded to it in the last 100 and, let's say, 50 years. First, I will introduce the challenge the theory of evolution poses to theistic worldviews, and then I will deal with the scriptural basis. What does the Quran, what does the prophetic tradition say about the origins of life? Does it matter at all? And also a little bit about how in pre-modern periods Muslims addressed religion and science issues. Then I will present three types of responses: adaptation, teleological reformulation or theistic evolution, and then the rejection of the theory of evolution. One could call this creationism. And then in the last section, I try to address the question why the rejection of the theory of evolution is today prevailing among Muslims, although different kind of responses have been formulated in the last decades. Now I will start with a list with which I start many of my articles and presentations on the theory of evolution. It is from the book The Growth of Biological Knowledge of the eminent German-American biologist Ernst Mayr. And he said that the theory of evolution in the mid-19th century challenged 6 assumptions on the living world which were prevalent in the West. It replaced a static with a evolving worldview, although Darwin was not first. It demonstrated that the concept of creation or creationism is not working. It refuted the concept of a cosmic teleology, that everything has a purpose. It undermined anthropocentrism, because man has a common descent with other species. It showed that the design, the functionality of living being can be explained by materialistic processes instead of a watchmaker. And well, the latter point is not so much relevant with regard to religion. It replaced the concept of an essentialist concept of species with the concept of species as a certain population with a limited degree of genetic variety. Now, if we look at the Islamic world, and I had a graph for which I got no copyright confirmation, survey polls have found out that, for example, up to 60% of the population, Muslim population in Pakistan and in Indonesia say that the theory of evolution is definitely not true. And also in Turkey and in Egypt, it's above 50%. Only in Kazakhstan, which had been under communist rule for decades, the numbers were different in that respective poll. Now I try to answer why this is the case. First of all, if we talk about Islam and Islamic beliefs, we have to address the Quran, and it is often claimed that the Quran has no story of creation, it has no Genesis, which is in principle true. But we also remember now the scriptural reasoning yesterday evening. The Quran addresses creation nevertheless, but it addresses creation as it addresses many aspects of the Judeo-Christian heritage. The Quran emerged in a context where many of the biblical stories were assumed to be known, and they are referred to, hinted at, not in order to provide detailed knowledge about them, but in order to teach a lesson with them. For example, to affirm that God is the creator and that this has certain moral, ethical implications for mankind. From the fact that God has created mankind, certain obligation results. If you remember the text from yesterday evening. And in that text we did not find mentioned how mankind has been created, but in other Quranic verses we will find that man has been formed from clay, and that the soul has been blown into Adam. And as a result, one could say that the Quran endorses the concept of special creation. Mankind has been created from the start. It has not emerged from other species, and although this is not mentioned in the Quran, it was in the pre-modern period always implicitly assumed that the same applies to other species. And for example, if we turn to the flood, the deluge, which is relevant with regard to the questions whether there are species which have become extinct or not, we will also find that the details of the flood of the ark, which make up a lot of space in the book of Genesis, do not matter that much in the Quran. It is important that people did not want to listen to Noah, and therefore they were punished. The details did not matter too much, although it is mentioned in the Quran that animals were on the ark in pairs. We have, however, to take into account a lot of issues or a lot of verses in the Quran which highlight God's continued governments of the earth. So Laura said a lot on that yesterday. The Quranic understanding of God is not the watchmaker who has tuned the clock up for once and then everything in the cosmos happens according to natural laws or something like that. In the Quranic understanding, God is continually intervening and sustaining. And what is also important, and here the Quran is in accordance with the Bible, creation is purposeful, both Harfia and Laura highlighted yesterday that it's always stated and emphasized that God had created the world for humans, the humans' benefit. So day and night shift. There are many plants we can eat. There is livestock we can use for food, and so on. However, the Quran is not the only source for Islamic beliefs and norms. If you look at law, the prophetic tradition is perhaps even more relevant, but the prophetic tradition is also or has at least been very relevant for many beliefs. Now, what is the prophetic tradition? The prophetic tradition, in Arabic sunnah, is a corpus of sayings and reports about deeds attributed to Muhammad. And these reports are authoritative for Islamic law, but a lot of the material also has cosmological or theological content. According to the Muslim view, these reports are authentic, and their authenticity is guaranteed by a chain of transmitters which accompanies all of these reports, hadiths, in 6 canonical collections which were collected in from the mid-9th to the early 10th century Common Era, and the most authoritative ones are the Sahih Bukhari and the Sahih Muslim, because they have most chains of most independent chains for each individual report. Western scholars in Islamic studies, however, think that they can prove that the hadiths have emerged in the first 2-3 centuries of Islam, and that they reflect theological and juridical debates in early Islam. And what I've said, that was all about the Sunni hadith, or the Sunni Sunnah. The Shiites also have hadith collections, but they have different hadith collections, and they refer to different authorities. In order to make it not too complicated, I have just been referring to the Sunni position in this context. The Sunnah is relevant in this context because some of the hadiths fill gaps the Quran left open. Details of the flood, for example. The Sunnah also contains sayings about the sequence of generations after Adam, Noah, and so on. And on the basis of that, one could conclude that the Earth has a certain age, which is about 5,000 years. So actually, in the pre-modern period, Muslims were conceptualizing the time frame of creation in a similar manner as Christians and Jews did. Some of the material in the hadith is very mythological. For example, stature of 60 cubits was attributed to Adam, and that is something which some people in the modern period referred to. Apart from the scriptural sources, there were also other sources which Muslims in the pre-modern period referred to explain the living world. In the Islamic world, the Greek philosophy was known to certain segments of the elite, and among the concepts which were known to these scholars was the so-called scala naturae, the categorization of all beings according to the degree in which they are animate. This starts with the world of minerals, which is inanimate, then come the plants, then come the lower animals, and then come the more intelligent and more man-like animals, and then comes mankind. And in the monotheistic concepts, then the angels come, and that concept was also known in the pre-Islamic world. And for example, in Sufism, it was partially integrated into the concepts, and some Muslim apologists today claim that scholars like the late Ottoman Turkish scholar Erzurumlu Ismail Hakkı in the 18th century were actually precursors of the theory of evolution because they refer to the scala naturae. Already in the pre-modern period there was a science-religion conflict in the Islamic world, and all of us know, hopefully, that astronomy flourished in the classical early Islamic period, that many of the astronomical findings which Westerners got to know in the Middle Ages were based on the research of Arab scholars. Arab scholars who again had relied on Greek material and what is often forgotten, Indian mathematics. But Greek astronomy, or the astronomical findings of the Greeks, which then were adopted by many Muslims, contradicted many cosmological sayings in the Hadith. And in the pre-modern period, we have, one could say that we have two different religious approaches to cosmology. On the one hand, we have a scriptural fundamentalism, which is sometimes called the Sunnah cosmology because it is based on Hadith material. It is mythological. For example, there are sayings that sun is prostrating before the throne of God during night, or that rain comes out of an ocean in the heavens. And that kind of material has found its way into many commentaries on the Qur'an and also into Islamic historiography. It is, this forms the starting chapters of some of the big world chronicles. But it has also been systematized in treatises of its own, and the most well-known, most famous one has been written by the Egyptian scholar As-Suyuti around 1500, and it's called Al-Hay'a As-Sunniya, so the Sunni, Sunnah-based astronomy. As opposed to that, Muslim theologians, many Muslim theologians like Al-Ghazali, but one could also add Al-Razi, whom Laura has referred to yesterday, argued that whoever insists on the literal interpretation of a Quranic verse or a hadith which contradicts definitely proven astronomical findings does a disservice to religion. And when there is definite proof for an astronomical phenomenon which contradicts Quranic verse or hadith, then that scriptural source should be interpreted allegorically. And yesterday we heard that similar hermeneutical approaches can be found in the history of Christian theology. For example, Calvin argued in a very similar manner. And we can also see that when modern post-Copernican astronomy became known in the Muslim world, starting in the 18th century in the Ottoman Empire, in other parts of the Muslim world later during the 19th century, many of the Islamic reformers used the argument of Al-Ghazali to legitimize the adoption of post-Copernican astronomy. And another argument which was used in this context was that it is the purpose of the Quran to demonstrate that God is the creator. The Quran does not provide or does not want to provide details about creation. And because the Quran wants to provide knowledge about God as the creator and not about creation, the language of the Quran appeals to the life world of Muhammad's contemporaries in Mecca and Medina. And therefore, the world is referred to as flat, or in the sense that God has flattened the earth for you. If you look around the world in your everyday life, it looks flat, and that's what you have to know. It is not astronomically correct, but to your everyday, with regard to your everyday experience. The same applies to the heaven as canopy. And such an argument was, for example, used by the eminent legal scholar Ash-Shatibi from Granada in the 14th century. And here again we have Christian parallels. Yesterday you have heard that St. Augustine and Calvin have used quite similar arguments. Now I come to the theory of evolution. I will come to a revolution because later some Muslims alleged that there was a link between the two. First of all, there are people in the Muslim world who accepted and accept the theory of evolution, but they do not interest us here yet. These are secularists which in generally do not argue within an Islamic framework. But of course they are a part of the Islamic social reality and the cultural scene in the Islamic world at present. And here I name, for example, in the Turkish case, the Young Turks before the First World War and the Kemalists in the interwar period. And among those who adopted the theory of evolution are also the modernists. Yeah, what is the difference between a modernist and a secularist? At least in the definition I use, a modernist is someone who argues within an Islamic framework. And for the modernist position, I will refer to one example. The one example is Syed Ahmed Khan from British India. He was an educational reformer. He promoted secular education among Muslims in British India, and apart from that, he was also a kind of community activist. He exhorted the Muslims to cooperate with the British government as the British presence in India would secure the Muslims against Hindu dominance. But a part of his educational efforts was also to show that Islam and the findings of modern science are in accordance. He argued that there is no contradiction between the Word of God, which means the revelation, and the work of God, creation. And most of you, or at least those with a British Protestant background, will recognize this as a deist position, and he has apparently read British deist theological tracts, and he therefore argued that there cannot be a contradiction between the laws of nature and what the Quran says, and whenever such a contradiction seems to appear, then the Quran has to be interpreted allegorically. And the Hadith he discarded anyhow. And for the theory of evolution, that means that it has to be accepted, because according to him it was proven by science. And in order to demonstrate that you can interpret the Quran in a way that it fits to the theory of evolution, he referred to those verses in the Quran where it is mentioned that men are formed out of clay, and he said that refers to the fact that soil contains all necessary elements for the human body, and thus clay is a metaphor for the chemical elements which are necessary to form life. Another approach to the theory of evolution are teleological reformulations. And such teleological reformulations of the theory of evolution have been formulated by a number of thinkers in the Islamic world who are, however, often considered as heretics by mainstream Muslims. I will refer to one example here. Unfortunately, I've no photo because of copyright, and that example is Mahmoud Muhammad Taha from Sudan, who was executed in 1985 because of his heretical opinion, although the theory of evolution was not the bone of contention in that context. He had founded a religious and political movement called the Republican Brothers in Sudan, which was then suppressed by the military government under General Numairi. Mahmoud Muhammad Taha argues that evolution is a directed process. Mankind has evolved from lower life forms, but evolution is a directed process. It culminates in mankind, and it is continued by mankind's spiritual evolution, which finds its fulfillment in Muhammad's message. What is also important to know is that this concept of evolution does not encompass the concept of natural selection. And although Mahmoud Taha does not acknowledge that, it is quite sure that he borrowed from Christian sources, in particular Teilhard de Chardin's attempt to bring the theory of evolution in accordance with Catholic concepts, and he had proposed a concept of different stages of evolution, starting with the emergence of life from the inanimate, then the evolution of consciousness among mankind, and then the highest degree of evolution, the spiritual evolution of mankind, culminating in Christianity. And the third positions Muslim could take with regard to the theory of evolution was rejection. The earliest rejection, elaborate rejection of the theory of evolution in the Islamic world we find in the 1880s, and it was formulated by another educational reformer, Hussein al-Jisr, from what is today Lebanon, from Tripoli, but in that period it was still the Ottoman Empire. And in principle, he argued, like Sayyid Ahmad Khan, that in order to cope with the advance of the West, and also, like in the Indian case, with the advancement of the non-Muslims in the area, in that case the Christians, Muslims have to adopt secular education, but he also thought that pure secular education would lead to immorality, and therefore he advocated an mixture of religious and secular education, and he founded a school in Tripoli where the prominent reformer and publisher Rashid Rida learned before he migrated to Egypt. But Hussein Najiz also wrote a treatise which is called the Hamidian treatise, because it was dedicated to the quite conservative Ottoman Sultan of that time, Abdul Hamid II. And he argued, among many other things, that the proponents of the theory of evolution he argued that in the Quran and the prophetic tradition, you will not find one single argument for the special creation of mankind. But there are many hints which are so convincing, if you put them all together, that it's clear that in the Quran, that the Quran proposes the special creation of mankind. The theory of evolution, however, is speculative. Its proponents have not come forth with a definite proof. And this means implicitly that the argument Al-Ghazali has formulated with regard to astronomy cannot be applied in the case of the theory of evolution. And apart from that argument, he has hundreds of examples for functionality in the life world, as you find in the natural theology of Paley. And these many examples are supposed to, in combination with that argument, to show that God is the creator and that men have been specially created. And here I show you another opponent of the theory of evolution, Abu Lala Maududi, born in British India and then later active in Pakistan after partition. He is one of the most important ideologists of the ideology, most important exponents of the Islamist ideology. He formulated many precepts which were then later adopted by many other Islamist organizations throughout the world, and in Pakistan herself he was active in the party Jamaat-e-Islami. Maududi did not pay particular attention to the theory of evolution. It was one of the many, in his eyes, Western delusions which he addressed once, but he had a particular explanation for its success, and he gave two reasons why they should be rejected. First, he argued that the theory of evolution is a result, an offspring of the what he calls theophobia, and he uses the Greek English word in the Urdu text of Western culture. Westerners dogmatically reject any cause in creation which is not materialistic. And therefore they reject a priori any intervention of God. And in order to explain this, he has formulated a parable, and he asked the reader to imagine Martian professor who visits Earth with his students. But the Martians have one problem. They are human blind. They can see everything but not humans. And so they come to Earth and they see vehicles. They see cars and trains and planes and boats moving around independently. And they observe even over time that cars move into factories and they come out as something else, and they become better by time. And so the Martians conclude that vehicles develop independently without intervention of somebody else. But this is of course the case because they cannot see the human engineers and workers who produce the vehicles. And he argues that the same is the case with regard to the theophobic Western biologists who do not want to see God, and therefore they don't see God, and therefore they claim that all life forms have developed independently. But apart from that, let's say, logical argument, he also comes forth with a moral argument. He says that the theory of evolution propagates the rights of the stronger, the right of the stronger to suppress the inferior, and therefore it turns the world and society into a battlefield. Now, as you have seen, different responses to the theory of theory of evolution exist in the modern world, and there also exist hermeneutical approaches which one can trace back to the pre-modern period, of which one could think that they make it possible to accommodate the theory of evolution to Islam. Nevertheless, or exactly because of that, we have to ask the question, why is the rejection of the theory of evolution then prevalent in Muslim countries and also among Muslims in many diaspora contexts? But if we look at two of the approaches, we will find that they have one thing in common. The proponents of theological evolution accept that humans have evolved from other species. In that respect, they have the same opinion as those who adopt the theory of evolution, but with the rejectionists, they share the idea that natural selection does not conform to Islam. And both approaches, the teleological reformulation and the rejection, operate with this juxtaposition of order, purpose, harmony, based on the Qur'an. And you can remember many of those verses Laura and Harfia have mentioned yesterday, and they opposes to randomness and violence, which they identify with the evolutionist worldview. And now I will return to Ernst Mayr once. Whereas anthropocentrism, or whereas even anthropocentrism is accepted by some Muslims, two other aspects: cosmic teleology and the explanation of design with random processes are the bone of contention. And now another point, which has relatively little to do with scripture. If you look around in the Muslim world, in the last 150 years, you will again and again find that the one or other figure has addressed the theory of evolution and wrote a treatise in which he advocates theistic evolution or in which he rejects the theory of evolution. But in most contexts, the theory of evolution never has been a major issue. For its most of its opponents, it was one of many Western delusions which had to be refuted. However, we can see one country where this is completely different, and this country is Turkey from the 1970s onwards. Also in Turkey we find also already in earlier periods writers who have rejected the theory of evolution. The book of Al-Jizr was translated into Ottoman Turkish, and in that period many Turks could still read Arabic anyhow. Then in the 1920s we have a 700 pages tracked against the theory of evolution by a retired bureaucrat and musician Ismail Feni Ertuğrul. But as in other countries, we find somebody here and somebody there, and then the issue was forgotten again. But in the 1970s, that changed. In the 1970s, we see a flood of treatises which are directed against the theory of evolution. And what is also very relevant is that in addition to a set of Islamic arguments, specifically Islamic arguments, which I have already shown, these people had also become aware of American creation, American Protestant creationism, and they borrowed part of the auxiliary argument from American creationist literature. This Turkish Islamic creationism has spread worldwide from the late 1990s onwards, because one person who was originally a fringe person in the Turkish Islamic scenes discovered the opportunities of the internet, and instead of publishing cheap tracts on paper, he put on all the material on the internet and had it also translated into Western languages and then also to other languages, and then it became known among Muslims worldwide. And the person I'm talking about is Harun Yahya, which is a pseudonym. His real name is Adnan Oktar. What you can already see is that one argument figures prominently in the argumentation of the Turkish Islamic creationists, and this is the alleged connection between the theory of evolution and certain European ideologies, just such as communism and fascism, which then is more or less the same as what Maududi had said about the theory of evolution in the 1940s. Now, what is the background? In the late 60s, early 70s, more and more young people with a conservative, often provincial background came to the universities, which at that time were dominated by Marxist or left-wing communist student groups. and they felt alienated and threatened, and some preachers from a particular movement, which is called the Nurju movement, addressed this issue, and they thought that with a general attack on materialism, they could draw the carpet away under Marxist and Kemalist materialism. One of the initiators of Turkish creationism is what has happened now? Sorry, that was the wrong button. Yeah, is someone whom you have heard about a lot in the news in the last months. I don't think that anybody beyond the second row here will be able to read it, but the name is Fethullah Gülen. He and other members of the Nurju movement preached against the theory of evolution, and then they also dispersed their sermons on audio cassettes and in treatises, and thus the rejection of the theory of evolution became a major issue for conservative religious circles in Turkey from the 1970s onwards. Yep. In this process, they could draw on certain memories in conservative Turkish circles, because the theory of evolution had, from the late 19th century onwards, be used by secularist political groups as the Young Turks, and then the Kemalists, which had emerged out of the Young Turk movement in order to combat religious conservatism. So in Turkey, the theory of evolution had already been a kind of ideological tool of the secularists against religion. And to my knowledge, it did not play a similar role in any other Islamic country. And to conclude, if it comes to the rejection of the theory of evolution as such, in the Islamic context, it is not so much a single scriptural sources, singular verses from the Qur'an or certain hadiths which matter, but rather a more holistic understanding of the Islamic worldview, which is seen as being in contrast with the evolutionist worldview. And if we want to see more than just a rejection, but a real, let's say, ideological creationist movement, we still need one more factor in the picture, and that is ideological opponents who actively use the theory of evolution to further their aims. And it was also only in such a context that the rejection of the theory of evolution took the form of a kind of ideological movement. I thank you for your attention.
Great, thank you very much, Martin. Do we have any questions? One at the front.
Thank you for your interesting presentation. I noticed that you haven't mentioned a third branch of both the prophetic tradition when you referred it as sayings and the acts, because I guess there is a third branch of that, the approvals of the prophet as part of the sunnah.
The approvals?
Yes. So the Sunnah is described or defined as the sayings, acts, or
Okay.
approvals
Okay, yeah.
of
yeah.
the Prophet Muhammad. And the other thing, a third part of the Islamic denominations, I'm not sure if you are aware of a third branch,
The Ibadis.
the Ibadi
Yeah.
school of law, which is dominant in Oman,
And yeah, certain
South,
areas,
East,
North
yes.
Africa, yeah.
And the other thing, I'm curious to know some of the textual evidence that were used by the opponents of the theory of evolution. You haven't referred to particular ones.
So,
If you can.
well, actually, it depends. Maududi, for example, Maududi, for example, does not use textual evidence. He apparently thought that it makes no sense to appeal to people who do not regard the Quran and the Sunnah as authoritative in the first place with scriptural evidence. It looks different if we come to Al-Jisr. For example, he for example, refers to all the verses where humans are made from clay and so on. That is the textual evidence he uses. And when you come to the Turkish creationist literature, they do as well not refer too much to textual evidence. They also rather use this kind of rationalistic arguments, and they use arguments borrowed from the American creationist literature, because their claim is not that the theory of evolution is religiously unsound. That's to be assumed anyhow. They claim that it can be scientifically disproven. However, people like the Nur Jews, and to some degree also Harun Yahya, they refer to scriptural evidence in another context. At the same time, they are also propagating what I've mentioned yesterday, tafsir ilmi, or what is today more often called the ijaz Qurani. That means they project certain scientific findings into the Quran. There they refer to the Quranic verses, but actually not so much against the theory of evolution, because as I've said, they do not want to demonstrate that the theory of evolution is un-Islamic. They want to show that it's unscientific.
Thank you for the talk. You mentioned two groups of people among the Muslims, those who want to support the theory of evolution, and their argument is that to be accepted in the modern world, that we should be in line with modern scientific understanding. And the other group is that those who rejected. And I just want to ask a question: that have you come across a third group of people who are indifferent to the theory of evolution, who doesn't care whether it's right or wrong, or whether we have to accept it or not accept it, based on the fact that they might believe that there are two types of verses in the Quran: the verses which are muhkam, which are clear and definite, and verses which are what is called mutashabihat, which are in English it's translated as allegorical.
No, ambiguous.
Ambiguous, or in
unclear. It's
yeah. So things which, I mean, I could give examples of those mutashabih. For example, the nature of God. We could never have a definite idea of nature of God. For example, the nature of hell and heaven, the nature of life after death, because we have no direct reference.
At least, I have to say that I've not come across such Muslims in written sources. So if they exist, they do not write extensively about it.
I'm putting forth this third
Yeah.
view.
Yeah. So if that position gains some prominence, I will certainly take it into account. But yeah, my approach was historically, and up to now, it has not been a position which made a very clear mark.
Yeah, because the creation of Adam falls into this second group of verses, because there's no clear reference for us to observe or
Yep.
So for those people, it doesn't matter. I mean, this evolution is a matter of observation. Then if scientists can observe that this is how it happened, that's fine. If scientists can't observe and there's no evidence to say that this is not how it happened, that's fine. But and this comes back to some of the previous scholars, the early scholars of Islam, who when asked about the nature of God, for example, the attributes of God, they would say, we know the attribute, we know the attribute, but how it is, we don't know. So we know that Adam was created by God, but how he was created, we don't know. So this third group of people wouldn't take evolution as a matter of theology for them to, it's indifferent.
Yeah, yeah. But that's also the reason why they do not write about it.
They don't care about it.
Can I just come in there briefly, Martin?
Yeah.
There's a piece that you might find interesting by someone called Jeffrey Guin in the States. I think he's at University of California now.
Right.
And he wrote his PhD thesis on this, looking comparatively at evangelical Christian high schools and Muslim high schools in New York City,
Right.
comparing attitudes to evolution in the two of them. And he shows that the Muslims really don't care about it. They don't bring it up unless he brings it up.
Right.
Whereas the Christians, he goes into the high school and it's one of the first topics of conversation that comes up. And his argument is that it's a primary identity marker for the Christians.
Right.
Whereas for the Muslims, evolution rejection is not they don't like it,
part of theology.
but it's not an important deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jeffrey Guin, recommend it. Anyway, sorry for taking
Okay,
over.
yeah, thank you for the...
Just now you mentioned the contradiction between the conservative and evolution, but nowadays we see, we want to find, do you have the third way or any other ways, such as sometimes we want to interpret the different ideas together about the direction of our development of a human being. After your research, do you have any idea about the new way, new approach, new direction? Perhaps sometimes we want to find the third way, but I think perhaps there are many ways. Can you give some advice, or about your
I don't want to. Well, I certainly do not want to give advice on how to interpret the theory of evolution. I think that's I don't. I will leave that to the biologists. Well, my approach was such a approach. For example, was the teleological reformulation of the theory of evolution, for which we find examples in the Christian context, as for example Taillin de Chardin, which then have influenced at least one Muslim thinker, but there are others I could name which are not necessarily influenced by Christian sources, like Ghulam Ahmed Parvez. But such group, because they had ideas which contradicted mainstream Muslim concepts in a variety of fields. They never had a strong following, and in some places they were then even persecuted as heretics, as in the case of Sudan. So such groups never had a strong following. And also the modernist argumentation has practically died out. So people advocating the theory of evolution are usually secularists, and where arguments like that of Said Ahmed Khan still play a role. Curious case are Pakistani biology textbooks. So there we find that according to the theory of evolution, life has emerged in water, and we can also find that in the Qur'an and things like that. But both the modernist approach and the teleological reformulation never had a broad following. I think there's
Thank you very much. I kind of want to push back on this easy division between modernism and traditionalism, especially with regards to the example that you used of Sir Syed Ahmed Khan, who was clearly a naturalist, right? He denied miracles, which was the cause of a lot of concern for other modernist thinkers like Muhammad Iqbal. Being in the context of colonialism, his school that he established actually gave birth to a very particular type of revolt from the other madrasa systems, who became more rigid in their curriculum systems, right? So modernism, in many ways, was also responsible for a type of conservatism in the madrasa systems, at least in Pakistan, that didn't necessarily exist before, because the older madrasa syllabus, you know, Persian, Rumi, Persian literature, fiction, literary works were quite predominant. So I think it bleeds into this idea that medieval understandings are primitive and modern understandings are like more developed. So
I don't think so that he influenced the madrasa system too much, because it's simply a matter of chronology. So the Deoband school was founded before Said Ahmed Khan had founded the Aligarh College. But anyhow, if there was no Aligarh school, so a secular school especially for Muslims, secular education would have made its way into India anyhow, because there were so many Christian missionary schools, many Hindus founded colleges, and many people founded secular schools without any particular religious emphasis. So Western secular education would have made its way anyway. And apart from Said Ahmed Khan, there were many local initiatives going the same way. So the all these Anjumani Islamia, which you find throughout the cities of British India and perhaps also in Sri Lanka, I don't know. These were Muslim associations which founded schools, but not religious schools, secular schools, so that Muslims could compete on the job market. And this next point is that Said Ahmed Khan was so cautious not to teach his theology at the university he founded. So people learned, of course, science, but he just published his theological ideas in his magazines, but did not make them compulsory in his college. He rather invited scholars from the traditional schools to give religious education lessons, because he knew how provocative his ideas were, and he did not want to undermine his practical educational reforms with provoking too much with his theology.
thank you.
I think Norio had his hand up earlier. So.
Thank you very much indeed. And I have two simple questions. And when you are talking about evolution, maybe very important things is the concept of time. how to think the concept of time and evolution. And for example, you use that kind of images like that, but but some of the theist philosophical thinking is the time is in not the from the directionism. There are many kind of in those of the Islamic world. There is many kind of the conceptual ideas of time. Is there any relationship with your evolution analyzed and with some ideas of time? That is one question. And also, is there any relation with the Qur'an movement? And then also there is some Muhammadiyah movement in Indonesia. And is there any relationship in the two movement? And that is, yeah. Thank you.
I address the first question first because it's easy to answer. I do not know. I myself do not know Malay, Indonesian, so the sources are not accessible to me, but I've also never come across research literature which addresses the reception of the theory of evolution in Southeast Asia. So unfortunately I cannot say something about it, and I'm now also contributing to a volume on the theory of evolution and Asian religions, and we could not find, or the editor could not find somebody who knows something about the development in Southeast Asia. This is unfortunate, but I can't help it personally. The other point is, of course, theory of evolution has to do with a certain concept of time, but time as such, as a sort of directional time against circular time, did not play any role in this discussions, because I simply assume that in the Islamic concept, circular concept of time does not exist. That's more something coming from the Asian traditions, not the Near Eastern theistic tradition. What matters, however, is the fact that the hadith has since the late 19th century largely been discarded in all matters that pertain to cosmology and things like that. As I've mentioned, in the hadith you also find a generational sequence which then amounts to a perhaps 5,000 year time frame. This does not matter any longer. Also, Muslims who reject the theory of evolution do, unlike American young earth creationists, usually accept a billion year time frame.
Roy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, just from sort of listening to what you've been saying, and thank you very much for your talk, it almost sort of seems to me that a lot of the arguments in the Islamic world about creation as against evolution seem to end up being more politically based than religiously based. And I mean, I accept that you could probably level the same sort of discussion about the creationism versus evolution arguments in the US, particularly at the moment from a Christian perspective. I mean, is that sort of a reasonable interpretation of what you've been saying, or have I misinterpreted it?
No, I think you're absolutely right with regard to what you've been saying about the Christian context. So, most of the time people refer to raw numbers, which I'm perfectly okay with. So in his book you learn a lot about what American creationists think, but there's also a very interesting book by a German scholar which has not had that broad reception, although it has in the meanwhile been translated into English. It is Martin Riesebrot. I think it's in the English title it's Pious Passion, and he compares American Protestant fundamentalism in the interwar period with the Islamic Revolution in Iran, and whereas Numbers and others who deal with creationism as their focus basically look on what the creationists say about biological issues. Riesebrot connects that to what they say about other issues like the role of women in society, the fact, the fear that Jews will undermine Protestant culture with business, and that Catholics and Germans will undermine Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture by drinking. You laugh, but the American Brewery Association had until the First World War German as the language of business proceedings. No, but Riesebrot looked at what fundamentalist theologians in the United States said about a broad variety of societal issues, and he also says, that is how the theory of evolution became a marker in a Kulturkampf, in a cultural conflict. It was seen as the symbol for the undermining of a harmonious, well-functioning Anglo-Saxon Protestant lifestyle, and therefore it had to be fought against. And it's actually the same. So also in some biologists, in particular those with a new atheist background, they also all the time have alarmist remarks about creationists in Europe, but these are totally marginal people and hardly anybody takes them serious. Also in the European context, you find Christians opposing the theory of evolution, but because in no context that could be connected to other social developments which conservative Christians opposed, it never developed into a social movement. It was a sectarian, remained a sectarian milieu.
Did I think Cheryl had a hand up, didn't you? And then we'll go
both at one
in front of her.
Yes, thank you. That echoes something I read recently about somebody was asking if there was a religious right rising in England, and they were saying, well, no, there are issues that people are concerned about, but there is no broad bank as you've described in the States. Thinking about your comment about the kids in the colleges seeing it as an identity marker, are there areas in the Muslim world where a rejection of evolution has become an article of faith, effectively? Which I mean, I know some American Christians are aghast that I don't have problems with evolution.
Yeah.
But so has it become an article of faith in any parts of Islam? And in connection with that, I was wondering, Sayyid Ahmed Khan, what heresy was he executed for? Was it evolution?
Mahmud Taha.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Right,
The first question. Where it become an article of faith there, that's relatively difficult to say in the Islamic context, as there are no churches as such who can proclaim certain articles of faith. But I would say that in Turkey from the late 1970s onwards, it has been become a core identity marker within the religious conservative milieu. Yeah. Well, as far as Mahmoud Taha is concerned, there is the prevailing opinion is that he was actually executed for political purposes, and that the religious arguments were merely a pretext. But I think that is not convincing. First of all, because in context where politics are strongly religiously legitimized, you can't really properly separate that. And the other point is that the Republican Brothers was not were not a movement which was dangerous to the Sudanese regime. So I think the common explanation is not convincing. And I think the argument or the point is that he subverted a central principle of Sunni jurisprudence. So the core, the basic assumption of Sunni jurisprudence is that is the concept of abrogation. Certain verses in the Quran contradict with each other, and the basic principle in Sunni jurisprudence is that the verse which has been relegated later abrogates the earlier one. And Mahmoud Taha subverted that, and he said that in the Islam started in the Meccan phase as a universal message, which cannot be changed and which is the core. And what you find in the later Medinan verses and in the Sunnah is later contextual development, which is not necessarily relevant in other contexts. And that was the bone of contention.
Question in front of Gerald.
I liked your explanation on this diagram, but somehow I've forgotten the different stages that you are trying to point out. Do you mind repeating?
Unfortunately, I've asked for the permission to use a graph, but I did not get it. So Tayyar de Shana argued that along the chronological axis, we can observe the spiritual evolution in degrees and decisive steps. First, from unanimate things to life, from life forms without strong cognitive abilities to hominid evolution with the full Homo sapiens intelligence, and then among the Homo sapiens a spiritual development. And actually you could argue that this is in some respect a modernized version of the Scala Naturae, which I have also introduced in this presentation. Tayyar de Chardin, who was a Jesuit, I think, Jesuit priest and paleontologist or paleanthropologist, to be more precise, wanted to, with this model, to bring the findings on paleanthropology in accordance with the Catholic doctrine in a period when the Catholic Church accepted evolution, but not for humans, which so happened in the 1950s. And he did not gain official acceptance, but this model was very popular among lay Catholics, and I assume also many priests, and it was translated into English, of course, and thus it was accessible to Mahmoud Taha, who was not trained as a religious scholar, but as an engineer. Yeah, there is that is quite clear that he was inspired by this concept.
Great. Hillary's got a question next. Oh. Oh, sorry, I thought you had a question. Well, we've got till 1:45, haven't we? Well, let's take this question here. Yeah.
It's just about Théo de Chardin. He also, his work was published posthumously, as I understand it. However, he also predicted a further evolutionary development. There would be a kind of super consciousness, and this was again very, debatable and and a conflict. And he sort of saw us as waiting in the shadow in humanity for further spiritual development. So I'd add that really, because it's quite a significant thing really. If we believe in evolution as a process, his sort of speculation really about any further spiritual emergence, and it fascinates me. At a personal level, I wonder if whenever you look at all sorts of communities, you always find that they're doing some kind of spiritual thinking or meditating or doing something or anticipating something extra themselves, or they're moving in some direction. And I'm wondering if he's right about further developments, that whether they are instrumental in the process, the actual physiological processes that we're actually engaging in something which will eventually, lead to further evolutionary processes.
That's something to mull over lunch, perhaps.
Yeah.
Thank you very much
Yeah.
indeed, Martin.
Yeah.